is Shannon Bowman-Sarkisian. If you haven't met me before, I am your public services librarian here at Mount Vernon City Library. I am fairly new to the position. I've been here about 3 months, and I've never done a live cooking demo before. That being said, I love talking about Armenian food, and I love to cook. So even though I have no formal training, I am very excited. So before I start showing you this recipe, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Armenian culture and Armenian food heritage. If you haven't spent time or lived somewhere where there's a large Armenian population, it can kind of be like, what is that? What is that culture? Most people know like the Kardashians, System of a Down, and if they know sort of like historical stuff, they usually will know about the Armenian genocide, which was the cause of a large Armenian diaspora, so including my family. So my family on my dad's side lived in what is Turkey, but they were Armenian and indigenous to that region. What is now the Republic of Armenia it's like Eurasia, so it borders Turkey, Iran, Georgia. It's really smack in the middle of what the Silk Roads were. So, for hundreds of years, there was a lot of trade happening, a lot of people moving to other places in the region. And I think the food culture is really heavily influenced by that. That being said, there's a huge difference between Western Armenian, which is what my family's heritage is. The food and culture are both more similar to what you would think of as Middle Eastern. Was very heavily influenced by Iranian culture, Turkish culture, and Eastern Armenian culture. There's a different dialect. Eastern Armenians became part of the Soviet Union. I was a young adult, and I met people who were from Armenia for the first time, and when talking about like food and culture, they're like, that's not Armenian. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's what all the people in my family said was Armenian. And as an adult, I've really found out that it is more similar to like Turkish culture. My family would make Turkish coffee, play backgammon. And so the spices that are in your cooking kit are, typically in Middle Eastern, North African cuisines. We bought 2 Armenian cookbooks to add to the circulating collection. They're back there on the table if you want to check one out. We were like, when we were cataloging, it's like, where do we put this in the library? Because one is classified as Eastern European and one is classified as Middle Eastern. And that's because one is Armenian American cooking, and that is from the Western tradition, more similar to like my family's journey and food. And the other one is contemporary food from the Republic of Armenia, and there is some crossover, but reading that cookbook and the history that was presented there was like, I have so much more understanding of my heritage and why my food, what I think of as Armenian food doesn't always line up with what other people think of as Armenian food. So I also wanted to highlight there's hummus and baba ganoush and olives and things on the table back there, but I'm super, super excited because I found this lavash. So lavash means bread in Armenian. It is a huge part of Armenian culture, not just food, but like everything. It's a symbol of the culture and the people. And this is the brand I grew up eating as a kid. So this bakery's out of Fresno, which has a huge Armenian American population. And I was like, oh, we gotta have some lavash. It's a cracker bread. So they're like giant round crackers that you break off a piece. You can like moisten it and roll it up to make sandwiches. I've never done that, and no one I know has ever done it. But apparently a lot of people do. So I think it would be amazing. And if I had thought about it for this recipe, I would have said, instead of using breadcrumbs, like if you have a food processor, maybe grind some of this up and put it in your kufta. So I might try that one day. This does have sesame seeds. I feel like that would be good. But, so what I ended up deciding to go with is panko, which is a Japanese breadcrumb. So I just love it for everything. I'd never used it in Armenian cooking. The recipe, I think, is like use your fresh breadcrumbs that you made. And probably like, if it was like an Armenian auntie, she probably makes lavash from scratch a lot and has it on hand to like make her fresh breadcrumbs. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And we can't put fresh bread in the kits, right? So I did do a practice one at home with this to make sure that the texture would be okay. I was really worried that maybe the meatballs would fall apart, but everything turns out great. So this is what you'll find in your kit, and this is what I'm gonna use today. So one thing I didn't mention in this recipe is I like to mix up some of the ingredients before I add the meat. So, I start with the breadcrumbs, and it's 1/3 of a cup. And I'm gonna try to use this clear bowl and show you so you can see what's going on. So we got our breadcrumbs. You can kind of see they're I like the color and the texture of panko as well. So you could use Italian breadcrumbs or anything you like. Kufta has many names from this region of like North Africa, across the Middle East, Eurasia. You may have heard it called kibbeh, kofti. There are different names. This particular recipe, I would call it really an Armenian American recipe. It has a lot of like Turkish roots to it in the flavors. And there is an Izmir kufta that you'll see in Greek culture and in Turkish culture, but it's slightly different usually, and they usually have it kind of like simmered with vegetables in a tomato sauce. So we've got our breadcrumbs, and so we've got 3 main spices and our salt. So allspice, I think it's pretty easy to find most of the time. It's something I like to cook with. Then we have Aleppo pepper, which is a little harder to find, I think. And one thing I would, just to be aware that sometimes when you're looking for spices for Armenian cooking or Middle Eastern cooking, there's salt added. So the other spice that I love cooking with sumac. It's one of my favorite flavors, and I have found it really hard to find it without salt added. So if you're watching salt or you just don't like, a salty flavor, just check the ingredient list. And then we have cumin, which is also seen in Armenian cooking a lot. We know, it's again pretty standard to find it in any grocery store. So the recipe calls for kosher salt, but I couldn't find it. because I forgot to buy it until today. So I'm just using Mediterranean sea salt. This is what I use at home, to be honest. It's fine. It'll be great. So we have a eighth of a teaspoon of allspice, which I have seen an eighth of a teaspoon like spoon, but I don't have one. So I just am taking a quarter teaspoon and filling it halfway up. So the smells of these spices is really comforting to me. This is kind of like my comfort food. And it reminds me of people who have passed on in my family, people that are still alive, but I live far away from. And I'm obviously very biased, but I think it smells and tastes really good. So we got 1 teaspoon of cumin, which is, again, one of my favorite spices to cook with. It's one of my favorite scents of, when I'm cooking. I also love garlic though, so just have that on your radar. And then we have a quarter teaspoon of Aleppo pepper, so I can use this spoon correctly. So I don't know why I leave the lids on. I don't shake spices usually. I just go in and get everything. So I'm gonna try to show you. You can see there's really beautiful colors represented in these spices. The Aleppo pepper is especially, it's a beautiful red. Sumac, if you've never cooked with it or purchased it before, is also another beautiful red. You've probably seen it if you buy hummus at the store. It's kind of sprinkled. That's what the red stuff is. It has a lemony flavor, and I love tart stuff. There's a lot of lemon in Western Armenian cooking, Armenian American cooking. I think that's one difference in the two cultures is lots of lemon and lots of garlic that you don't always see in Eastern Armenian cooking. Okay, so salt, 1 teaspoon. I'm also realizing that I forgot to get an egg, but it's okay because I prepped meatballs for this event. And they are, because you're supposed to let them sit in the fridge for half an hour. So just know you're supposed to use an egg or white wine. I pre-chopped some garlic, but I'm gonna chop a little more just to get the feeling. It's minced. I think it is okay to kind of make it a coarser mince because the garlic will soften while you're cooking. So I'm a garlic smasher. Not everybody is. I also have a problem with, I feel like recipes use too little garlic. So I'm inclined to do more than what is called for. So I do also really enjoy sort of the flat part of the blade smash. I don't know, there's something I really enjoy about that. And I don't want us to have to be here all night while I do this, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get my pre-chopped in there. Okay. And so it says 1 clove of garlic. I used 1.5 cloves, but that's personal preference. I like a really strong garlic flavor. I think you could do that with the pepper too. I have not found that the pepper in this recipe, like it's not like super spicy, but there is a little bit of a kick to this pepper. I don't really notice a kick when I eat the meatballs, so you could maybe go up a little bit. But if you don't like spicy, I think you could use Hungarian paprika instead. And or if you just don't have this pepper on hand and you can't find it, you can do a ratio of 3 parts Hungarian paprika or like smoked paprika and 1 part cayenne. And it's probably not going to be exactly the same, but close enough. So yeah, okay. We are also going to do a 1/4 cup chopped flat leaf parsley. I'm going to say something controversial, and it's that I think you can use curly parsley and it would be fine. Like, the other thing that I'm going to say is that I do not like chopping parsley. It is, I don't know why. I don't like to do it. And that is really unfortunate because there's so much parsley in Armenian cooking. And I have a food processor now, which makes it a lot easier. For the amount that you need for a recipe like this, or a recipe like tabbouleh, it's so much parsley. Especially the way my dad makes it. And in your booklet, I share a recipe for tabbouleh, and I talk about the way my dad made it when I was growing up, and it was like all parsley. This, I do think it would be best to chop it as fine as you could, but you could do like a rougher chop. Meatballs in general are kind of forgiving, I find. You can substitute a little bit. If your garlic is not perfectly minced, I think it's okay. Like it's not the end of the world. I do have my pre-cut parsley. So, this is the thing. I didn't say mix things together before you add the meat, but this is the part that I'm gonna mix together before adding the meat. And so one thing I mentioned in the booklet is that it's really annoying for me to try to get my relatives to share the recipes, and they'll happily share them, but a lot of what I am told is like, you gotta do it till it feels right. Yeah. Like you add tomato paste until it feels right. And I'm like, but how much is that in cups? Like, I don't know. So this feels right to me. So I kind of understand where my aunts and cousins are coming from, because I've never seen this written down in a recipe, like mix these things together. But I like to do it because, I don't know, I just feel like it gets everything mixed together before you add in the meat. I don't want to have a pocket of salt or like a pocket of breadcrumbs. So you just blend everything together all at once. So what I do is I put the egg or wine in when I'm put the meat in. Like it kind of looks like tabbouleh, but you've got your breadcrumbs. The spices you can't even see anymore. It's a lot of parsley. And all right, thanks, Elisa. And then, thanks. Would you give me the prepped ones too? Okay, so the official version of this recipe calls for ground lamb. I said ground lamb or beef because lamb is expensive. And I think it's authentically Armenian American to use ground beef. That's what I know my family used a lot. And I think, people came to this country and they might not have access to the same ingredients that they had back home. So you substitute things. And I think and some people don't like lamb. It has a flavor. So I would say the recipe will not suffer if you use ground beef, maybe turkey. I've never tried it, but it's probably fine. I do have a little bit of lamb left over from when I prepped the meatballs that I'm gonna actually cook tonight. So I'm doing a mixture of lamb and ground beef just because I was like, it's less money. So what I'm gonna do, this is a pound. So sometimes it can be harder to find ground lamb as well. The Skagit Valley Co-op had it. It was frozen. It only comes in a pound. So I just, I saved this, and you can use it for something else. Or like when I made this at home, what I did was I made like lamb patties, and I just kind of made up what, I use kind of the basic same ingredients, but I made up the ratios, and I just did it until it felt right. But I also think of this food as something that you're going to be having with your family for a celebration. Like to me, cooking like this is more something that it's not something I do all the time. There are people who do it all the time, and it's probably much faster when they do it. But so it's kind of special occasion that you want to make this, or you're like, celebrating. But I also think it's okay to experiment in the kitchen. When the ingredients are expensive, I might be less inclined to do it, but this is why I get in trouble with baking, because I'm like, well, what if I try this? And I don't do any research. Okay, so I'm doing half a pound ground beef and a quarter pound ground lamb. I've seen this in other Armenian cooking before too, where it's like partially ground beef, partially lamb. And maybe if you're making like a huge batch for people. And I see that in other recipes too, like meatloaf I'll see sometimes. It's like ground pork and ground beef. I don't use gloves at home, but your hands usually will smell a lot like meat after you do this. So that is a big reason why I'm doing this. Also, it just felt a little more sanitary, even though we're not eating this tonight. But yeah, so I just like to kind of get a good squish in there. When I'm doing this, I can kind of feel when the breadcrumbs are really mixed in. There's not like a big pocket of breadcrumbs happening. It's also easier when there's an egg or some white wine in there. But yeah, I mean, part of the reason I chose this recipe for this trial by flavor was because, even if you don't know what kufta is, you know what a meatball is probably, and you may have made it before. So just to show you kind of what my big ball of meat looks like, I'd like to say I did a pretty good job. So another thing that I think is good to have on hand when you start forming it, your individual kufta, is like a little bit of water, because they can get sticky and it can be harder to form. So, what I do is I'll just pinch off, however big of a size. Like, I think you could go bigger and be okay. Traditionally, I feel like when I see them, they have a pretty sharp point on the ends. And I haven't really achieved that. But, I just kind of make them like that. And another recipe that's in the booklet is for a vegan kufta, which I have never made, but it's made with red lentils. And those were traditionally used at Lent when people were avoiding meat. Also Suzanne had mentioned that she had seen this recipe to me, and then I forgot, and then I saw it again, and I was like, we should use that. So we have like a vegan option for people. My family has used green lentils in place of ground meat for family members who don't eat meat, and I think that is totally something you can do. We've used it in sarmas, so I don't think it would work for meatballs, but you could probably use this recipe's flavors and kind of like, have your lentils cooked and then, throw some parsley in. I just make them like I'm making a regular Italian style meatball, and then I kind of roll the ends a little bit.
How would you use the water?
Oh, like I just like if it starts feeling like sticky. But yeah, also if you just wanted to do a round ball, like it's your house, so do what you want. Like I don't think it would affect the cooking or the flavor. I think it's more just sort of like this is traditionally how they were made. So, normally I would make all of this and then we would put them in the fridge for a half hour and just sit around and wait. But I have some ready-made to go, and I will just show them to you. Mine came out kind of looking like eggs, like little meat eggs. But I think they're very cute. I'm gonna set these aside, and this one, and I'm taking off my gloves. So, in the recipe, it calls for 2 tablespoons of olive oil or 2 tablespoons of butter. I use olive oil because I am very lactose intolerant, and even a little bit of dairy can make me really sick. And that's actually true of a lot of people in my family on the Armenian side. So I have heard, though, of folks who just only use the butter to cook these. And I've also heard some families will do like half butter, half olive oil, and that is apparently the best way to do it. So if you have the ingredients on hand, you might want to try it. To heat these guys up, it's like you start medium high, and just put your olive oil in there, or your butter and your olive oil.
The butter burns.
Does it?
If you use it just butter. So if you use half and half.
Oh, okay. So yeah, those families probably know what they're talking about. Yeah, like I said, I don't see a lot of people in my family cooking with butter, and especially like nowadays, like maybe more when I was growing up, but nowadays I think it's seen as more less healthy maybe, and it probably depends on what butter you're using. But while this warms up, in the recipe it says to shake the pan while you're cooking the kufta. And I have a really hard time doing that without making a really huge mess in my kitchen. So I am using tongs. This is, I think it's more just like because I'm not an experienced cook with this particular dish, and I just like haven't cooked that way with like shaking the pan as much, so this works fine, I think. But I think the idea is really that you don't want your kufta to stick to the pan and get burned, but because the first part of cooking them is really at a higher heat, so I think they're definitely more at risk of burning. So I don't know if it's really ready, but I'm gonna start putting these guys on. Another thing that's really important is that you don't want the kufta to be touching. So you might have to do it in 2 batches. I think I like to do them maybe up to like 9 or 10 at a time. When my dad was growing up, his father made yogurt at home. And so like yogurt is something you'll see a lot in Armenian cooking. And desserts, like I think there's a sponge cake that has, it's like a yogurt soaked cake or something. And I believe there's lemon in it. So like my grandpa would make yogurt, and he also made turshi, which is pickles, an Armenian style of pickling vegetables. I forgot to bring another plate, so I'm just gonna put these on this cutting board. But yeah, so the way I feel like I can be the most in touch with this part of my heritage is through food. But I really like the way these flavors kind of come together when they're cooking in my kitchen. So, yeah, I know. The way I would eat this at home is a mezza plate. So I like to have like I would get dolmas because I would get pre-made from the store. So the Greek rice dolmas. I would get some dolmas, I would get some tabbouleh, which I probably would also get from the store unless I was feeling like I really wanted to do it for some reason. And put the work in and cut up some cucumbers, get some carrots, some other, raw vegetables, and maybe like a nice green salad. And I would just eat it a plate, I think these would be really good with rice pilaf. They would also be really, really good, I think, if you had a flatbread. It could be pita, it could be lavash that you've softened. You could make like a sandwich, like a pita sandwich. When you're doing this at home, you might want to do like the 5 minutes at the high heat and then 5 minutes at a lower temperature. And then 5 minutes in the pan cooling. These guys are cooking up really good, so I don't know that they need them. The end goal here is that you really want crispy. And I kind of feel like it even looks maybe too crispy sometimes, but they taste amazing when they're really, really crisp. The other thing I would say is if you have a grill and you could grill these as a kebab, that would be like the way to go. So I highly recommend that if it's an option for you. You could just get a kebab skewer, pack of skewers at the store. I think a way my dad would do that would be he would probably do like bell peppers and white or yellow onions and maybe cherry tomato or sliced tomato and, just kebab style, like alternate ingredients and then grill it. And probably, a lot of the fat would melt off if you did it that way, which, could be healthier. So I appreciate your patience with me this evening as I try to navigate doing something new. And I hope was informative or,